Hello! Today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite decks, helmed by the Scorpion God, which is a 5 mana 6/5. Whenever a creature with a -1/-1 counter dies, draw a card. And for 1 black red, 3 mana, we can put a -1/-1 counter on another target creature, which we will be calling the Sting ability. When the Scorpion God dies, he comes back to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. Alongside the Scorpion God here, we have Obosh the Prey Piercer. He is a companion that we could play if all of the non-lands in our starting deck have odd mana values, so 1, 3, 5, etc. And Obosh is a 5 mana 3/5 that doubles all damage from odd mana value sources. So Obosh, being a 3/5, when he's in play, will attack as a 6/5. And Scorpion God, being a 6/5, will attack for 12 damage while Obosh is in play. Okay. I was originally going to just jump straight into the cards that have been cut, but I figured it's important to give some context as to what this deck does. So our deck makes copious use of tons and tons of removal spells, and we'll have a small excerpt here. And the goal of playing this many removal spells with a commander like Scorpion God is a twofold. So one, the Scorpion God Sting ability, right, allows you to mark a creature with his minus counter, and then when you kill it later with a very, hopefully for a very cheap mana cost, right, such as Fiery Impulse, you get your card back. So you get to play a lot of removal spells without running out of cards. And a lot of commander decks nowadays are built to rely on a lot of value creature sticking for a long time, and our deck can control whether that actually gets to happen or not. Um, the alongside the removal spells that we play here, we do supplement it with some board wipe. We already see Toxic Deluge here, and we have Blasphemous Act and Blasphemous Edict. And I'm not gonna go too much into the details of the deck, but basically, alongside our removal spells, alongside our Resilient Commander and Obosh as like an extra oomph, we play sort of a scrappy, kind of control game. We go with the flow, see what happens, and yeah, that's what this deck does. Okay, all right, let's start with some cards here. We have Blowfly Infestation and Soulscar Mage. So both of these cards are, very common. You will see very highly ranked on EDH Rec for Scorpion God because he is a creature that rewards you for playing with minus counters. Blow Infestation is a 3-mana enchantment. Whenever a creature dies with a minus counter on it, you put another minus counter on target creature. Soulscar Mage turns non-combat damage sources into minus counters. So both of these are very potent. In the case of Blowfly Infestation, the most powerful thing that you can do with this card is with Scorpion God in play, you can basically shotgun all of the 1 toughness creatures and draw a ton of cards, right? Because if you pay 3 mana, you sting at 1/1, the 1/1 dies. Blowfly Infestation sees that a creature with a minus counter on it has died, which then places a minus counter on another 1 toughness creature, which then will die, and then this process repeats. And with Scorpion God in play, you get to draw a card every single time a creature dies this way. You also get to save on the mana to not have to sting further creatures, because in order for Scorpion God to quote unquote refund us the card that we use to remove another creature, we have to pay 3 mana per creature that we remove. But with Blowfly Infestation in play, we can lightning bolt a creature, it dies, we draw a card, and instead of having to pay 3 mana to sting another creature again, right, Blowfly Infestation does that for us. So over a long period of time, Blowfly Infestation is a lot of, you can think of that as a lot of Scorpion God sting activations. Soulscar Mage here allows us to execute pretty powerful combo plays, right? Just even lightning bolting a single creature and not having to sting in to refund a card is pretty powerful. And we can also use a card like Blasphemous Act to hopefully wipe the whole board with -13 counters and probably draw a ton of cards. Blowfly Infestation, notably here, is also an infinite combo outlet if you play another 3-mana enchantment called Nest of Scarabs, which gives you a 1/1 whenever you apply a minus counter on a creature. With Blowfly Infestation and Nest of Scarabs and Scorpion God in play, you enter a loop. You can enter a loop where you create a 1/1, you put a minus counter on it, it dies, you draw a card, you make another 1/1, you put a minus counter on it, it dies, you draw a card. And you can use this to draw your whole deck, right? And this is a valid direction to take the deck that you want to play. But I actually don't play either of these. In fact, not only do I not play Blowfly Infestation and Soulscar Mage, I also don't play any cards that generate minus counters or minus counter synergies aside from the commander. And probably, this would be the hottest. I opened with these two because these are probably the hottest exclusions. And the reason why these cards have been excluded is let's start with thinking about magic cards in the context of whether they're good early and they're good late. Nowadays, in Modern Commander, especially, Wizards is non-stop printing cards for us, and what that means is that the quality of the cardboard has increased significantly, and playing cards that aren't just always good uh, starts to feel like it's not enough, right? This is no longer like 2016 from when I started playing, which you can kind of do nothing, play lands, and like just chill and have a nice game, right? You will just gonna get run over if you do that nowadays. So ideally, for me to enjoy playing any card and putting into my deck, I really want them to be good early and good late. So let's think about these two cards in the context of that, right? Blow of Infestations cost 3 mana, and assuming that we don't ramp, we play Blow of Infestation on turn 3. Doesn't do anything. We play Blow of Infestation. We untap on turn 4 with Blow of Infestation. This also doesn't do anything because remember that Scorpion God has 5, right? Without Scorpion God in play, the value of Blow of Infestation, especially when you don't have other minus counter cards, just non-existent, right? We untap, we play Scorpion God on turn 5. Blow of Infestation still doesn't do anything because we don't have the mana to sting any creatures with the Scorpion God. And it's only on turn 6 when we untap with Scorpion God, assuming that that even happens, because of course, other players could see that we have Blow of Infestation and Scorpion God in play. They wouldn't want us to have this powerful synergy component or synergy combination, so they could maybe remove one of the two pieces. So even assuming that we survive to untap with the Scorpion God, we are the benefit that we're getting is roughly 3 mana, right? We can sting a creature, kill it with a lightning bolt, we draw a card. We could do that without Blow of Infestation in play, but now Blow of Infestation kind of rewards us with 3 mana, which is like not bad, but that reward that we get, we have to go through all of these potential failure points, and we don't get a substantial benefit for, in my opinion, right? That one minus counter that we get on turn 6 is pretty medium, and maybe we can go for a second creature and get a second counter, but at this point, you know, like the amount of time that we had to use, right, with Blow of Infestation in play not doing anything is just, to me, it's pretty dissatisfactory. So we'll say that Blow of Infestation is not quite great in the early game, and Soulscar Mage is very similar, even though this is a one-drop creature and you can play very early and you can maybe weave it in between your other turn sequences. Soulscar Mage is just a 1-2 with prowess, and you're just not storming off in the early stages of the game. We're not playing 1v1 20 life formats. So Soulscar Mage will probably peck in for like 5 damage or so, right, if you cast it on turn 1. And similarly, doesn't do anything until Scorpion God hits the battlefield. So both of these cards are not really great in the early stages of the game. Later, they matter quite a bit more, but even in the case of Blowfly Infestation, a lot of the sequences that you can perform with this card, you could always just staying with Scorpion God one more time and you save having to play this card. And because of that, in order for Blowfly Infestation to really pay off, I would only be happy with it if it triggered, let's say, 3, 4, 5 times at the very bare minimum, right? If that doesn't happen, I am not interested in playing Blowfly Infestation. And if you think about Blowfly Infestation in the context of Commander, where people love playing token decks, people are not blind. They will see that you are trying to assemble this combo that shotguns all their 1 toughness creatures, and they're going to do their best to make sure that you can have it. And in our Rakdos Commander deck, that doesn't have enchantment recursion, doesn't have protection spells for our powerful permanents, it just doesn't, the equation just doesn't produce a result that is comfortable for me to want to rely on this kind of effect that only really pays me off after triggering many times. In a game where my token opponents are just kind of asleep at the wheel, generating tokens for me to destroy, those kind of games, I'm probably favored to win anyways, and I don't think I need a card like this. And if they have disenchants because token players are likely in green or white colors, it's kind of a blowout, right? No pun intended. And Soulscar Mage is a little bit better in that regard because it's a 1 mana play that you can weave in, but on balance, having an effect like this, being such a non-factor in the early stages of the game and only synergizing with damage spells, right? Because cards like Tragic Slip that gives a creature -13/-13 that does not interact with Soulscar Mage, forcing our opponents to sacrifice their creatures, same again, does not interact with Soulscar Mage. So the card ends up being good, but also very narrow, especially if the removal suite in your deck is not super focused on damage, right? So I think for many of these reasons, I've actually not enjoyed Blowfly Infestation and Soulscar Mage at all. I think this is kind of an important lesson here to not just blindly go after synergies that a commander sort of asks you, right? Scorpion God himself screams to please play a deck full of -1/-1 counter cards, and the reality is just that the vast majority of them are just terrible and not worth playing. They are like 4 mana 2/2s or 3/3s that like on ETB you put 2 minus counters on a creature, which is just not a commander quality card that you can afford to play. Okay, so next up, what do we got here? We have all right, we have these three here. We have Vicious Shadows, Double Vision, and Pyromancer's Goggles. Vicious Shadows is a 7 mana enchantment that when a creature dies, you get to zap a player equal to the number of cards in their hand. Very, very potent. Notably, this triggers once for each creature dying, so in the later stages of the game, if the board is pretty clogged, you drop Vicious Shadows, you destroy all creatures or a significant portion of creatures, then very likely at least 1 or 2 players will die from the burn. So very, very potent, very cool card. Double Vision here is a 5 mana enchantment. Whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, copy that spell. So this copies one spell per turn and triggers up to 4 times per turn cycle. And over here we have Pyromancer's Goggles, a 5 mana artifact that taps for a red, and if you use that mana to cast a red instant or sorcery, you can get to copy it. So the common theme that is transcending between all these three cards is that these are high payoff but also quite slow value enchantments or artifacts. In our earlier I mentioned that in our Rakdos commander deck where we're neither able to protect or recur these, I'm sort of not very happy to play these, and these type of cards are even more powerful than a card like Blowfly Infestation, because a Double Vision that sticks around for multiple turn cycles is very, very likely to win you the game. And you would imagine that these types of cards are very, very good to play in our decks that play tons of single target removal spells like Lightning Bolts. Actually, in fact, my list currently is on like 30 instants and like 10, around 10 sorceries. So copying your spells would be very, very good. But these cards end up getting excluded for a variety of reasons. Let's start with the obvious, which is that these cards don't do anything in the early stages of the game, despite being a control deck with a lot of card draw. It is still very painful to have bricks in the early stages of the game because I need to cast card draw spells to find my land drops. I may need to kill somebody's creature that they've played because Wizards refuses to stop printing bullshit. A good example would be like a card like Brave's Arisen Nightmare, right? That thing draws 3 cards per turn cycle roughly, and needs to go the moment it hits the battlefield. And the more cards like Double Vision that you put into your deck, the less likely you're capable of answering that, and the players who play those cards get to run away with the game. So lots of reasons to not want to play these greedy cards, but I think you probably already know that. And the reasons why these cards get put in your deck is their late game potential, right? And while true, I want to offer several reasons why I think these are not that great. So first of all, these cards are because because they cost so much mana and the impact that they provide on the very first turn that they resolve is not great. These are actually questionably good in the late game, right? Double Vision, the moment that you resolve this card, it costs 5. You probably don't have that much mana left unless you have a card to follow up that's immensely good to copy, like Brass's Bounty, which I'm not currently running. Copying something innocuous like a lightning bolt and then having your Double Vision removed by the next person's reclamation stage is just not a good place to be. Similar with Pyromancer's Goggles with even lower upside, right? And being restricted to red spells as well. Vicious Shadows is a bit more powerful, a bit more impactful the turn that you play, but realistically, because the enchantment deals so much damage, the way that you take advantage of Vicious Shadows is to spend 7 mana to resolve it on the same turn, drop a board wipe like Blasphemous Act. That's how you would presumably get the best results with this card. But even in that specific situation, if any of your 3 opponents have instant speed enchantment removal, you get to wipe the board, but your 7 mana investment gets thrown into the trash, right? So then that's a type of risk that I'm not really willing to take. So that's one thing, right? They are good in the late game, but they're very similar to Bullify Infestation in that they don't provide a good impact immediately, and they need multiple turn cycles to stick around. And in the late games that I sort of participate in, I really want all of my cards to do something pretty significant immediately, especially something that has that costs as much mana as these cards. And if you're not doing something really, really good immediately, then I want you to be more resilient, right? Whether you be a creature that's hard to remove, or you have some sort sort of built-in protection. Something that's a bit more, resilient. Oops, excuse me. Something that's a bit more resilient is something I want more in the late game. So what do I mean? So what cards would I play instead of cards like Double Vision and Pyromancer's Goggles? Well, there's a 5 mana sorcery called Ghoul's Night Out, right, which reanimates one creature from each player's graveyard and gives them decayed. And this is a type of card that is a similar later gameplay like Double Vision, but has the potential of reanimating some really powerful creatures and to win you the game on the spot, or to give you an overwhelming advantage right away. Right, and these types of cards are just so much higher caliber, in my opinion, than slow, repeatable permanents that you need to accumulate tons of value over a long period of time to win the game. So that's one aspect, right? That they're completely not good early, and in the late game, their value is questionable. Another reason why I don't enjoy playing these cards is that the games in which you win with Double Vision and Pyromancer's Goggles, right, where you've copied many, many, many spells over a very long time, those kind of games, those types of victories, in my eyes, are very lame, because any game in which a Double Vision sticks around and you copy any number of spells any number of times is a game which you're very likely advantaged to win anyway. So for me, I really believe in the power of the cards that I'm playing, right? Like I'm playing some very, very cards that we will never see in Commander, such as Galvanic Discharge and Fiery Impulse. I think these cards are very, very good in Commander, but diluting them with spell copiers, right, just makes it, sort of that the star of the show is the copy permanence and not the spell that I'm casting. If you don't sort of don't understand what I'm saying, right? We have Lightning Bolt here. Lightning Bolt, I think, is a pretty powerful card in Commander, but if your deck has Mizzix, the 4 mana one that discounts spells in the command zone, and you perform the Firemind's Foresight combo, where you tutor Lightning Bolts, reset and reiterate, and you infinitely copy Lightning Bolt to kill everyone at the table on the next person's upkeep, well, you've won the game with Lightning Bolt, but Lightning Bolt was not the star of the show, right? The star of the show was your infinite mana outlet, or infinite combo outlet, basically, with the combination between Mizzix and the other cards. So that's one aspect of it as well, right? Which is that cards like Vicious Shadows, Double Vision, Pyromancer's Goggle, they sort of take away the thunder of the other cards in my deck that I want to showcase, right? My win condition usually is to grind the board to grind out grind down the board, and sort of punch in with Scorpion God as like the finisher, or sometimes maybe I can't control the board and I have to race certain players that are about to pop off with Scorpion God as well, and that's very reasonable. I think those are much more preferable, and the games where I have those cards feel pretty harmonious. Introducing these powerful enchantments that steal the thunder is not really my cup of tea. So, and the final thing with not including these cards is if you think about counterplay, right? So what do I care about counter? What is the counter to these cards, right? These are the counter to these incredibly powerful value enchantments, value artifacts is like cheap cheap disenchants, right? Like Naturalize, or Nature's Claim. I think Naturalize maybe. Anyways, the way that I've approached deck building over a long period of time is that if I have a deck that I've really, really enjoyed playing over a long period of time, it's likely to become good enough such that my opponents that I have that play with me or have played against the deck over a long period of time, they sort of will find ways to counteract my game plan and find ways to disrupt what I'm doing, or maybe make it so that I can't have all the things that I want. And when you play cards like Pyromancer's Goggles, Double Visions, and Vicious Shadows, you're opening yourself up to being smothered by your opponents, right? Because you have 3 opponents in a Commander game, 3 times the amount of card draw, and maybe they are even in better colors for resource generation like Simic. And with the ease in which your opponents can simply deny you from having these powerful permanents is unappealing, right, for me. Because if you think about the life cycle of any Commander deck that you spend a long time working on, initially when you first start playing them, it's hard. You're learning the deck as you get along. Maybe all of the synergies haven't clicked yet. You don't quite understand like how you're supposed to win a game. But over time, the more you master, the more you jive with what's happening, your deck becomes better and better. And if players are noticing that you're winning a lot, they will try to find a way to stop you. So these types of cards are, in my opinion, are very, very easy to stop, and I'm just not interested in that, right? If somebody doesn't want me to win the game, I want to make it difficult for them to disrupt me. And paying 7 mana for a card like Vicious Shadows and having it blown up is a surefire recipe for me to lose the game. So yeah, we'll be putting these aside and moving on. All right. Next up is we have some ramps. So here we have a smattering of mana generating cards. We have the Celestis, which is a 3 mana rock that makes mana of any color and introduces the day-night cycle. And when the day-night cycle flips, you get to draw a card, discard a card, and gain 1 life. Notably, the Celestis is actually quite nice in the deck that I'm playing here because the Scorpion God Sting ability can be activated at instant speed, of course, and the vast majority of the removal spells that I'm playing can also be activated at instant, can also be played at instant speed. So it's very easy once Celestis is in play for me to just pass the turn and maybe do a little bit of attacking and have it flip to night. And of course, on other players' turns, it's very easy in the later stages of the game for somebody to double spell, which means it then flips to day, and that's just with Celestis in play, seeing all of that day night transition, getting 2 loots per turn cycle on average is pretty decent. We have Gilded Lotus here, which is a 5 mana artifact that has 3 for any color. We have Cursed Mirror, 3 mana artifact making a red, and when it enters, it can copy a creature with haste until end turn. And Burnished Shard and Wafer's Bubble here are sort of overcosted, ways that non-green decks have of land ramping. So over time, I've decided to cut pretty much all of these types of explicit ramp cards out of my deck. I do still have ways to generate mana or jump ahead in lands a tiny bit in the deck that I'm currently playing, but the basic reason why these cards end up getting the cut is, there's multiple. So let's start with the fact that the deck that I'm building, right, wants to play a lot of removal spells. So you can call this sort of like a density deck, right? The deck that I'm playing sort of doesn't make sense if the deck is not full of removal spells. And the nature of mana rocks, right? You want the best time to cast a mana rock is in the early stages of the game, right? Early game, like turn 2 or 3. Well, in the case of an Obosh deck, where I can only really play 1 drops or 3 drops. So let's say turn 3 for 3 mana rocks. And in order to reliably see a rock in the early stages of the game or any ramp spell, you really need to play a lot of them, let's say like 10, 12, 15 plus. And that's fine. You play this many mana rocks and you are very likely to win, which is good. But now you run into the problem where you really only want one of them, or at least I think I only really want one of them, because the second mana rock is not as good as the first, right? We've already ramped 1. We're already at like 5, 6 plus mana. Paying 3 mana to ramp us by 1, just not a really good use of my time. And the later that the game goes, the less that +1 mana really matters. And having 12 mana rocks in your deck alongside anywhere between 30 to 40 lands as like top decks in the late game just makes it so that the quality of the cards that you draw is becomes quite bad. And I've not found a happy ratio of mana rocks that I'm happy to play. I have experimented with only playing a few of them, with only playing the ones that have late game applications. It just like doesn't end up working out really well. Cursed Mirror is top tier disappointment for me. I have drawn this card in the late game several times and it just never had anything good to copy, and part of that is the way that the deck plays. It removes, it keeps the board like relatively clean, so actually that has sort of anti-synergy with Cursed Mirror. So that's one reason. The density of removal spell that the deck demands you to play in order to have its game plan of chaining removal spells with Scorpion God is clashes with the need to also play 10 plus mana rocks. That's reason number one. And the other one sort of is that I've just learned that with the deck that I'm playing here, that playing a land every single turn, never missing a land drop, is just good enough. If you think about the way that a commander game goes, a lot of typical decks want to end the game, let's say like turn 6, 8, 10 or so. But the deck that I'm playing is quite different. I want the game to go for a very long time because I'm capable of doing that, right, by dragging down the value generation engines that people are using and all that good stuff, and stopping win conditions with removal spells. So if I'm a deck that can keep up in card draw and I hit my land drop every turn, on turn, let's say like 10, 12 or so, where I've hit all of my land drops. I just have more mana than somebody who plays their first 5 or 6 lands, then misses half of their land drop for the rest of the game, even if they play a couple of mana rocks. I've just found that not to be a problem, and so getting to cut all the mana rocks to improve the quality of the cards that I draw seems very, very appealing. And yeah, and of course there's the constant, dies to board wipe kind of thing, and I think that aspect of not giving targets for my opponent's disenchants has been a tool that I've reached into that has been very successful for me, right? I sort of don't enjoy dealing with card types that I don't synergize with, or that it recur, right? So that's kind of the case with all of these mana artifacts. The number of games I play in which I have to then board wipe myself as well, because I do have access to Oblivion Stone, which is my one of my only ways to answer enchantments. Having that sweep away your mana rocks feels pretty bad. So what do I do actually for ramp that's not mana artifacts? Well, I like to play uh, ways to ramp that are pseudo card advantage. So a good one would be Myriad Landscape. Myriad Landscape is a pretty slow card, but which is okay with this deck that I'm playing here because I have a ton of control tools. And Myriad Landscape is card advantage, right? Because Myriad Landscape turns one card, one land into 2 lands. We call that. So that's card advantage. That's very different from paying a card or a 3 mana and a card for a single ramp like the Celestis. This is a 1-for-1, but a Myriad Landscape is a 2-for-1. Another good example would be Temple of the False God. It is a land that makes 2 mana, so it's as if you play 2 lands for 1. So that's kind of ramp with card advantage. And the way I'm supporting that, of course, is by playing tons and tons of lands and lots of cheap card draws, so that I'm very able to reliably hit that 5 landmark for Temple of the False God. Another good one would be Thespian Stage, and not for any actual like crazy uh, copy synergy stuff going on with Thespian Stage, but more so because people play bounce lands, and if you copy a bounce land, Thespian Stage becomes a multicolor land. So with those like smattering of incidental ramp, but mostly just hitting all of my land drops, I've had pretty good success, and I'm very happy to not have to play mana rocks any of my decks. And I encourage you, by the way, if this is something that you stick into, like if every single deck that you make, you start off by putting Arcane Signet and whatever signets are in your colors there, I encourage you to double check that assumption, right? That every single deck, maybe this is the deck that doesn't need that. So, oh, and of course I do still play Soul Ring, uh, because Soul Ring is busted. Okay, cool. Moving on, we have these cards. We have Demonic Embrace, March of Wretched Sorrow, Terrain Generator, and Sensei's Divining Top. And actually, there's a couple of other ones that should be here that I'm missing. Oh yes, I've put them away. But these cards kind of seem like they're none of these are related, but the common theme that strings through all of these cards is similar to what I just described with Mana Ramp, is a card advantage. Demonic Embrace here is 1 black for an enchant creature. It gives an enchanted creature +3/+1 flying and becomes a demon, and you can cast it from your graveyard by discarding a card in addition to paying its mana cost. Demonic Embrace being an enchantment that provides flying, which is something that Scorpion God desperately wants. Very powerful. It also gives a sizable power boost, which is also very nice, and being able to cast from a graveyard makes it kind of resilient. You can cast Demonic Embrace, and if Scorpion God leaves the battlefield, you can later cast it again from your graveyard. I've just found that the cost of discarding a card is very hard to pay. The deck that I've built here is not very does not draw tons of cards. The Scorpion God's Sting ability, refunding cards, is theoretically very good, but it's also very expensive. And it's hard to rely on, and I choose to not play. Like, there's just not a density of card draw permanence value overtime value engines that I'm happy to play with, like Phyrexian Arena. So it's hard to feed the cards for Demonic Embrace, and it's hard to overstate how much the card that you discard to Demonic Embrace is such a big problem. I've had the similar thought process before with cards like Faithless Looting and Seize the Spoils, which are basically just the cards you discard cards to drama cards to filter through your deck. It's just that the games that unfold with this deck, I just need every single card. That's kind of it, right? Every single card I draw, I need that card really badly. If I discard a land to cast Demonic Embrace, I feel I end up running into a situation where I miss a land drop because I discarded that land to Demonic Embrace. If I discard a removal spell that I don't need right now, I find myself in a situation later where that removal spell would have come in really handy. And without any discard synergies or cards that come back to your hand repeatedly, like Squeak, Upland, and Bob, I've just not had good time paying the discard cost for Demonic Embrace. And the other problem with Demonic Embrace is actually very hard to cast early. If you resolve Scorpion God on 5 mana and you want to suit up Scorpion God immediately with Demonic Embrace, well, you're just asking for somebody to remove your commander, right? Because you're putting a 9 power flying commander into play, which is very quickly going to snap people's necks. And for all of those reasons, Demonic Embrace just ends up being a card that I really enjoy the idea of the card. I think is really cool, but I've just caught it over time and I've never looked back. March of Retrosoro is a X black instant, which deals X damage to target creature and you gain X life. So you can pay 10 mana into March of Retrosoro and deal 9 damage to a creature and gain 9 life. Unfortunately, the life gain part of this card does not get doubled by Obosh. It does get you can double the damage with Obosh if you pick an X such that the mana value is odd. But the life gain, unfortunately, does not get doubled, which is really disappointing. I think if that was the case, I would really think about playing this card more. And there's a clause here where you can exile black cards from your hand to discount the card by 2. So let's say you had a full grip of 5 black cards that you didn't mind losing, and you can exile all of them. You can actually cast March of Retrosoro for X equals to 10 and deal 10 to a creature and gain 10 life, which for a deck in Rakdos colors, a control deck that really needs life gain, we really want to squeeze out mana advantage because we're not a green deck, seems really, really appealing, but the reality, similar to all of the wolves that I've had so far, I just don't have the cards to feed to March of Retrosoro, so it just ends up being a card that you cast for retail a lot of the times, and that's just not a good place to be. Very unfortunate. I think the card is really cool. Terrain Generator here is a land that taps for colorless and 2 tap. You can put a land from your hand. You can put a basic land from your hand in the battlefield tapped. So Terrain Generator, similar to the previous Ram cards that I've described, like Wayfarer's Bauble, Burnish Heart, the Celestas. These Ram cards, unfortunately, are not card advantage, right? When you activate your Terrain Generator to ramp a basic, you're not putting the basic from your deck into play. You're putting it from your hand, right? Which means you're losing cards board from your hand. And any time you play with Terrain Generator activated to ramp basics, but then you end up running out of lands in your hand and you miss your land drop, that's ultra disaster mode. Anytime that you activate Terrain Generator, run out of lands, and have to then take your turn off to draw cards to find land drops, also really bad. It sort of feeds into itself. The problem sort of cascade a balloon out of control itself because you're ramping, which is something that's generally pretty scary, but not only are you ramping, you're also probably not doing anything because you're sort of wasting your turn, like wasting like 3 mana just repeatedly activating this. And when you do this, people get sort of scared of you, but you've put yourself in a vulnerable situation where because you're spending so many cards to put lands into play, you have to recuperate that cost by drawing tons of cards, which means you do even more of nothing. And this is not a place I've enjoyed, right? There are games where I draw Terrain Generator in my opening hand. I have lots and lots of basics to Terrain Generate, and I just find that I Terrain Generate 2 or 3 times, and I feel like I've done nothing. And all of the mana advantage that I've quote unquote gained with Terrain Generator are fed back into digging for resources and like frantically trying to stabilize. It's just not worth it for me. So and also over time the number of basics in my deck slowly decreases, and just all of these factors just make Terrain Generator not a card I want to play. If you're a deck that doesn't play green and is capable of putting lots and lots of basics in your hand, definitely play Terrain Generator. This is one of my favorite cards, even though it is not the right card for this deck. And since it's Divining Top is a 1 mana artifact that you can pay 1 mana to rearrange the top 3 cards, you can also tap it to draw the card off the top of your library, but since Divining Top puts itself on the top of your library. So if you are not familiar with how this card plays, the only thing you really need to understand is that since Divining Top is not card advantage, you only ever get card selection, because while rearranging is good, you don't draw extra cards from that. And tapping Senses Divining Top to draw a card seems like it's card advantage, but Senses Divining Top leaves the battlefield and it removes your next draw step, right? Because Sensitive on Top puts itself on top of your library. So Sensitive on Top doesn't give you extra cardboard. Well, unless you untap it at instant speed, but this is not something that we do in this deck. And because of that, what happens a lot with Sensitive Dividing Top is I have 3 cards in hand. I cast top, I spin the top, I see nothing that draws me more cards, and I'm really, really sad. Or even worse, I keep an opening hand with Sensitive Dividing Top and 2 lands. I cast Sensitive Dividing Top on turn 1, on turn 2, on my upkeep, I spin the top, and I see 3 spells on top, and I just cry, right? So for many of all these reasons, right? These are cards that are really require you to draw a ton of cards to support, and this is not the type of deck that I'm playing because as much as I love lightning bolts, these cards have downsides, right? These are cheap instants. They are not repeatable value engines. They leave the hand really quickly, so it's very important for the deck to not bog itself down by expending even more resources, right? The cards that I'm playing are already so expensive on the resource count. Playing more cards that demand more resource out of me is very counterproductive. And this is something that you can make up for if your commander is sufficiently powerful value generation engine, which Scorpion God is not, right? So yeah, because of that, these cards end up getting cut over time. Okay, next up, Next up, we have Magmatic Sinkhole. Magmatic Sinkhole is a 5 and a red instant with Delve, and you can it deals 5 damage to target creature. So it's very cool, very sweet lightning bolt variant. Unfortunately, Magmatic Sinkhole costs 6 mana, even though most of the time that I cast Magmatic Sinkhole, it would cost 1 because the deck is full of cheap spells. So it's very easy to pay the Delve. But yeah, I had to find out in a game that I put this on the stack that it's actually illegal card to put into my deck. So that's very fun. So watch your mana cost, guys, for your companion decks. Okay, so we've talked about mana rocks, we've talked about some value engines, we've talked about some synergy pieces, and let's talk about the removal spell part, right? Because if you could be surprised at how many sweet removal spells that we have access to in Rakdos being the removal colors. So I'm just gonna put a smattering of them up onto the table here. We have, and let's just go through them one by one. So here we have Fatal Push, which is a black instant, destroy target creature with mana value 2 or less. With Revolt, you can destroy a creature that costs 4 or less. If you're a 60 card constructor player, you probably know what this does. The Revolt is very hard to trigger in Commander because we only can play so many fetch lands, and the deck that I'm playing is not we're not an aristocrat deck. We don't sacrifice like game objects like clues and treasures and stuff very frequently. So the Revolt part is pretty hard to turn on, and even if Revolt was free, in Commander people play lots of high mana cost creatures, which are often the ones that you do want to kill. So Fatal Push, unfortunately, it's just not quite good enough to make the cut. Next up, we have Weight of Spires, which is a single red instant that deals damage to target creature equal to the number of non-basic lands that player controls. Weight of Spires, on balance, I think is quite powerful. It scales very well with the budgets of your playgroup or the table, right? The more expensive decks that people play usually have tons and tons of non-basic lands, which makes Weight of Spires a really strong removal spell. Very easy for Weight of Spires to deal like 10 damage to a creature. It's very possible in a game. So the card is actually very good. The issue that I've run into, which is really disappointing, unfortunately, is that very frequently people that are playing monocolor decks or decks with a lot of basics, very frequently those decks also happen to be green decks. Weight of Spire just does not deal enough damage to kill the creatures that those decks play, and the downside with Weight of Spires is that it's also not reliable in the early stages of the game. It's very frequent that a lightning bolt just gets the job done, but Weight of Spire only deals 2 damage. Those things happen often enough, and the fact that it does not kill the really big creatures that come out of the green decks, unfortunately, means Weight of Spires ends up getting cut. But I do really like the card, and I think that if you want to play a deck like this, or you're exploring off meta or niche the removal spell choices, you should really consider Weight of Spires. All right, next up we have Defile. It's a single black. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each swamp you control. I don't play Urborg or Coffers, so having Defile just be 1 mana kill a creature is very difficult. The -1/-1 aspect also does not synergize with Obosh, because remember that Obosh does actually double the damage of pretty much all the removal spells in this deck. And having swamps be the vector that scales the removal magnitude is good, but it has also kind of bitten me in the ass a lot of the times. It's kind of really weird to overstate like how much it matters for the spells to deal a reliable number, right? The number of times that I've had to file be -2/-2 when I really need a 3 damage spell is just crazy. Like, I wouldn't imagine that that's how the games would play out, but it just does. And that aspect of like not being as good as 3 damage, which sounds crazy. Like I'm feeling like I sound like a madman, right? Like I'm looking at the file and I'm just thinking, but this is so good, right? Like if you draw this on turn 8 or whatever, it's definitely going to be like -4, -5. Why am I playing Galvanic Discharge with no energy cards? Why am I playing Fiery Impulse over it? But the reality is just that, right? The number of times that Defile misses because it only is -1 or -2 far, far, far outweighs the number of times that it's like a -8. So unfortunately, Defile gets the cut. And next up here, we have Reckless Rage. It's a single red to deal 4 damage to target creature I don't control and 2 damage to target creature I do control. Reckless Rage is really good. This is a very recent cut, and the reason why it eventually got eliminated is the fact that it requires you to have a creature in order to use. The current composition of my deck has been more creature heavy than it has been in the past, but on average, it's very common that in the early game I don't have a creature in play, which is the time that you need this types of effect the most. Not only do we have cards to deal with like Braids or Risen Nightmare, we also have cards like Six, right? Like I think that's a 2/4 that allows you to trace permanents from a graveyard. The card is complete bonkers. We have a new creature that just came out. This video is being recorded after Edge of Eternities. We have a new green creature called I Still Explorer, which is a 4-mana 3/3 that is both an exploration and a Crucible of World. Absolutely disgusting if Reckless Rage doesn't kill that in the early game. So just enough of this circumstance has happened where Reckless Rage is just being turned off early has become a huge liability that unfortunately it gets the cut. Okay, next up we have Ghastly Demise. It's a single black. It's a Doomblade for 1 mana, but instead of costing 2 mana, it only costs 1. And the downside is that it only kills creatures that have toughness less than the number of cards in my graveyard. Doomblades suck. This is, I think, probably no surprise to many of you if that have played Shriekmaw. It's a very common card you'll see in EH tables. The number of times that I've seen Shriekmaw cast targeting a black creature is immense. I think the number of creatures that Shriekmaw has killed is about a third of the number of times that has targeted something that it cannot kill, right? Which really is crazy. And the reason for that is because, you might imagine, oh, but non-black creatures, but there's 4 colors in Magic, right? Why would that be bad? Shouldn't this kill pretty much everything? And the reason is because people play multicolored creatures, right? Non-black does not mean non-mono black. So a black-red creature is not an illegal target for Doomblade. A Esper creature is not legal for Doomblade. So it's just very frequent that somebody has a bullshit commander out that just happens to have black in its colors, and you can't target it with Ghastly Demise. Not to mention, Ghastly Demise also requires you to have a fat graveyard, which means it's not reliable in the early game. And worst of all, people can exile your graveyard in response and just blank this card. So even though this card is really cool, I like it, unfortunately, it does not make the cut. And similar to Vendetta, right, on top of being a Doomblade, which is already pretty bad, it also deals damage to you equal to the creature's toughness, which means even just taking like 6 damage from a medium-sized creature, it's just a big blow. The control deck really, really need that life gain, and you don't want your removal spells to also deal damage to yourself. So Vendetta, over time, has made the cut. And here we have a single red for a Flame Slash, which deals 4 damage to target creature. Flame Slash rate is really good, but it's a sorcery, not an instant. Play instants, don't play sorceries. It's that simple. All right, and I wasn't kidding when I was talking about removal spells here. I have definitely dredged through the depths of the removal spell card pool, so to say. Okay, so all right. Coming up here, we have another selection of removal spells that I have played and cut. Starting with Active Volcano, which is a single red for an instant to destroy target blue permanent, or bounce an island to its owner's hand. That part is less relevant. These color hate spells I've actually really enjoyed. Most of them ends up getting cut because the deck ends up wanting to do other things and have other avenues to explore that's not just removal spells. Kind of a fat surprise, right? You kind of can't have a commander deck that's 45 lands and 55 one mana removal spells, even though that would be a really cool deck. Um, Destroying a blue permanent is very relevant because Rhystic Study exists. People who play Rhystic Study, this may be you watching this or listening to this, your Rhystic Study deserves to die. And Active Volcano is good for that. And similar to why Doomblade is bad, right? We just described the reason why Doomblade is bad is because it's not just mono black creatures. A Doomblade also misses like multicolored creatures that are black. The reverse of that is the benefit, right, of color hate cards, because destroying a blue permanent does not mean destroying a mono blue permanent. It's any blue permanent, which means the Esper commander that probably has some bullshit reward for drawing a ton of cards or whatever, is a valid target for Active Volcano, which is really good. Um, yeah, so I think this card is really cool. It also looks like a volcanic island. I've definitely had players go WTF at me playing what looks like a volcanic island in a Rakdos deck, which is just really hilarious. And the part of the rules text that returns an island to his owner's hand there's a hilarious dream scenario that can happen if your opponents go turn one island and turn two bounce land, and you active Volcano in response to their bounce land trigger to bounce their island, which then forces them to bounce their bounce land to their hand. That hasn't happened to me yet, but maybe you could play this card to maybe make that happen one day. All right, next up is Human Frailty. This is a single black instant, destroy target human creature. I put this card in the deck as a meme originally, but it just never misses. For whatever reason, the number of humans that Wizards print into the game that are like powerful and need to be destroyed, it's just immense. Um, I guess for whatever reason, market research tells Wizards that they need to fill a quota of humans in every single set or something. But yeah, Human Frailty is really cool. I'm really sad that I have to cut it, but if you just next time you play a game of Commander, just look around at the table, just inspect the number of humans that you would be happy to pay a black to destroy right now, or at the time. And I think you'll be surprised. Next up is Death Marks, a single black sorcery, destroy target green or white creature. This would be very good if it was an instant. Unfortunately, it is a sorcery, which means it cannot be played. I was very excited recently that Death Mark was actually reprinted in Standard, I'm pretty sure, but not making it instant. It's very, very disappointing. So you'll have to get the cut. Next up is Dark Betrayal, single black, destroy target black creature. This is surprisingly very, very good. Way better than Doomblade. I'm 100% a fan of Dark Betrayal over Doomblade. And I've definitely had some sweet moments where somebody flashes in an opposition agent in response to me searching my library, and I hit them with a Dark Betrayal, and it's awesome, right? But yeah, ends up getting cut because there are just better cards or other cards that I want to play. But this is really good. I recommend you play these. And here we have a selection of color hate spells. We have Execute and Slay, which respectively destroys a white creature, draw a card, and Slay, destroy a green creature, draw a card. I kind of like these. I cut these relatively quickly from my decks in the early drafts because I found that Execute just misses too much. Slay is something that I'm thinking that I should maybe include more and more because like green just refuses to stop getting insane, disgusting creatures that need to die. So maybe Slay could make it back to the deck one day, but currently it's sitting in the sidelines. Perish here, 3 mana, sorcery, destroy all green creatures. This is very powerful. I've had games where I sort of not work together with the green player, but sort of nudge the game in such a way where the green player gets to run rampant. They clean up the other two players, and I untap, I draw Perish, I wipe their board, and then I basically win the game from there, right? So Perish is cool applications. It doesn't. Unfortunately, the thing that I don't like about Perish is that the games where you win with Perish, they feel very anticlimactic. Even though it's very cool the first time, it's a very novel experience to have such a specific, odd, old color hate card. But it just it's just so like the ways that the games end, just the magic is just gone very quickly. So I've not enjoyed Perish a lot, but who knows, right? If the Green Menace continues to be a menace, then it's a meta call. So fortunately, those are going to be on the sidelines. All right, so we've gone through a lot of cards already. Let's talk about some niche, let's say dream cards that I wish worked better. that they do, but over time have just not made the cut. So here we have Desecrate Reality. Desecrate Reality is a 7 mana instant which exiles a even mana value permanent from each opponent. And if you cast it with 3 colorless mana, satisfying the adamant part, then you can reanimate a permanent with odd mana value from your graveyard. So this is a pretty sweet card for an Obosh deck because all of the permanents in the deck are odd mana value. So if you can satisfy Desecrate Reality's adamant cost, you can always reanimate something, which is very sweet. But the reality of trying to build your deck around this card is that Desecrate Reality asks you to make a lot of sacrifices in deck building by including lands that can tap for colorless. And earlier I've already talked about Thespian Stage, which taps for colorless sometimes. I've talked about Temple of False God, which would be a really good way to pay 2/3 of the cost, but it's not reliable because you don't tutor for that. And so you really need to start tweaking your mana base just for this singular card, right? Otherwise, casting Desecrate Reality without triple colorless is just kind of whatever. And one of the lands here that we use to do that, we can use to do that, was shown here, Molten Slag Heap, tap for colorless, and you can basically put storage counters on it. And there are other candidates here too, right? There's Graven Cairns is one of the filter lands that makes colorless. There's Arcane Lighthouse is a good candidate if you want that kind of effect. There's Drawing Your Temple, makes colorless. It can reanimate from the graveyard if you play with graveyard synergy. So there are ways to sort of build your deck such that you have enough lands that produce colorless to satisfy Desecrate Reality. But on balance, what ends up happening too frequently is the lands that make colorless are significantly disruptive to the plays because Scorpion God's sustainability costs 1 red black, right? So wanting to activate that alongside playing all these cheap 1 mana removal spells that are just only color pips is just a freaking nightmare. And I've definitely had games where I draw my opening hand, I only draw lands that make colorless, and it's just completely miserable. And the payoff for Desecrate Reality really is you reanimate a Pinnacle Monk and you regrow the Desecrate Reality, you put it back into your hand so you can do it again next turn. Like, that's kind of the ceiling. Oops, sorry. It's kind of the ceiling for the payoff, which is that's just not good enough, right? It only hitting even mana value permanents is good because it can always target land, so it will never miss, but lots of good enchantments that the deck really wants to be able to deal with are odd mana value, like Rhystic Study, right? So yeah, unfortunately, juice is just not worth the squeeze. I've loved fantasizing about Desecrate Reality, but after playing with the deck long enough times, just cut it eventually. Very disappointing, even though I really love the card. Okay. Up next, we have some land stuff. We have some more land stuff. So here, let's go with Sunken Citadel. Sunken Citadel basically enters the battlefield tapped and makes 2 mana for land abilities. I love utility lands, so Sunken Citadel was kind of like a no question pickup for me when it got spoiled. When I inspected my actual list, though, the number of lands that I play with activated abilities is actually just very, very few. And in order to shoehorn the card into my deck, I wanted to use it with filter lands because with Sunken Citadel in play, if you have a Shadow Blood Ridge and a Graven Cairns, both of those turn 1 mana into 2 mana, so you can tap Sunken Citadel for 2 land mana, feed those 2 land mana into your 2 filter lands to make 4 mana. So that's kind of what I wanted to do with Sunken Citadel as like a baseline, and then maybe the like 3 utility lands that rest of the deck will sometimes come up, and it just never does. Having your combo, quote unquote, be a 3-card combo that you don't tutor for, just never gonna happen. In your commander games, unless your deck is busted and you draw through the entirety of it, or see most of your cards, or you're just tutoring constantly, you're just not seeing the density of cards which would allow you to assemble this. And the payoff for the Sunken Citadel plus double Filterland combo is you ramp once, right? Which is just so whatever. And yeah, just not worth the cost of having a tap land, which is very unfortunate because Sunken Citadel is very cool. In similar veins, more lands that I have ended up not enjoying. Here we have Dwarven Mine. Dwarven Mine is one of those broken out drain lands that comes into play untapped if you control 3 or other mountains, and coming into play untapped gives you a 1/1 dwarf, which is pretty cool. It's not like a big game winning value generating play, but having access to a 1/1 that's comes off of a fetch land, well, even though it's a high budget gamer thing, can have a lot of utility. You can fetch a 1/1, block a big creature without trample, and then sacrifice it, right? Maybe to a village rites or to scorpion card, draw a card. Uh, when somebody drops a flashbag on the battlefield, with you only having your commander in play, you can fetch for Dwarven Mine to absorb that. That's very cool. I have made that play before. And you lose Monarch or the initiative, and somebody you can fetch a dwarf at the end of turn to maybe steal it back. There's a lot of utility with having access to a free 1/1. It's a lot more feasible to actually you make use of, because it's not like Sunken Citadel that you need to tutor up like three specific lands, right? But I think the deck that I'm playing here, Dwarven Mines, does have a real deck building concept. First of all, here we have two typed duels that come into play tapped: Geothermal Bog and Sulphurous Mire. These are both swamp mountains that enter the battlefield tapped. I am already playing all of the other fetchables. That's not Badlands. I'm playing like Blood Crypt, Raucous Theater, Canyon Slough, Smoldering Marsh, and just density is just not high enough, especially if you also want to play basics. So I think these do need to be included in order for you to be able to turn on Dwarven Mine reliably. Dwarven Mine is a tap land a lot of the times if you draw it early, which is a problem. And the number one problem that I have with Dwarven Mine is it makes me think about how I sequence my lands, right? Because Dwarven Mine only makes a 1/1 if you have 3 mountains, and I just don't want to think about maximizing the number of mountains I have into play in the early stages of the game. Um, like I have, I could very well want to play with black heavy spells, and being forced to play out the basic mountains from my hand rather than the swamps. That's just like a terrible place to be. Regardless of how much benefit Dwarven Mine may eventually give, the fact that it deals me psychic damage with having to make me think about sequencing my lands in all these different directions is just not a good place to be, and I've happily removed Dwarven Mine from my decks. But if you do anything that's like crazy busted, like polymorphing with uh, indomitable creativity, then obviously Dwarven Mine's much more appealing. But I'm not doing anything like that, so it gets cut. And more Dream Crushed cards. We have here we have the duo. We have You Are Already Dead and Mirrodin Avenged. These are 1 mana instants that destroy a creature that has been dealt damage and draws you a card. So these are very efficient. If you can turn these on, 1 mana destroy a creature, draw a card. Very powerful, very nice. And you would imagine that makes sense with the deck that I'm playing here. Alongside here, we have some potential enablers. We have Gut Shot, which is a Phyrexian red instant that deals 1 damage to any targets. You can cast this by just paying 2 life, and so use no mana. So this is kind of a sequence you can go for, right? You can Gut Shot a creature and then target it with Mirrodin Avenged. And here we also have Flick a Coin, 3 mana instant, deal 1 damage to any target, make a treasure, draw a card. So very similar, like low cost way to deal a point of damage to a creature, making them legal targets for You're Already Dead and Mirrodin Avenged. My experience with these cards, very disappointing. The Scorpion God Sting ability is not considered dealing damage, so that by itself does not trigger these two. If it did, it would be very powerful. These cards would be like slam dunks in the deck if stinging was considered damage. They're not, which is very disappointing. And using these other removal spells that don't like draw cards themselves in order to turn on these removal spells just doesn't make any sense mathematically, right? Like Mirrodin Avenged plus Gut Shot is a 2-card combination, so you've spent 2 cards to destroy a single creature, right? So this is currently a 2-for-1 against you, right? That's bad. You draw a card though, so it's kind of like a 2-for-2, but you haven't gained card advantage that way. You've assembled this little combo. It's a very cool slick sequence. You've killed a creature that you probably can't kill with just basic lightning bolts, but your payoff is not high enough. And Gut Shots individually, while I have definitely killed players with it, it's a very fun card to play with. Like people always have a good laugh when you put a Gut Shot on the stack. It just doesn't do anything ultimately, or doesn't do enough overall. Similar with Flick a Coin. The number of times I cycle Flick a Coin is like absolutely just terrible. Paying 3 mana to draw a card and make a treasure, it's just terrible. That's not an EDH playable card, unfortunately. So, yeah, dreams have been crushed. I would love for these cards to be better, but they're not for this deck. Right? They're more for something with access to non-combat damage in the command zone. Okay. Next up is Blood for the Blood God. This is a 11 mana instant, 8 black black red. Costs 1 less for each creature that died this turn. It deals 8 damage to each opponent. You discard your hand and draw 8 cards. Very sweet card. It's a very cool spell from the Warhammer 40k set. I have definitely won games with this card, but the reality is that when I draw this, it just sits in my hand until I draw another one of my board wipes like Toxic Deluge or Blasphemous Act or whatever, and that's not good, right? The board wipes themselves are already very powerful cards. We really don't need cards that piggyback off of other good cards to do anything. And without wiping the board first to make this cost 3, it's very hard to cast. Even though it's an instant, the base cost being 11, yeah, the average EDH board state doesn't have enough dead creatures in order to like satiate the discounts for it to be like a comfortable number to cast, and it's really disappointing. I think this card is really sweet. I wish the card was better to play, but yeah, the vast majority of games that I play, the card sits in my hand until a board wipe happens, and even then, a turn where you resolve something like Toxic Deluge to wipe the board, you don't then want to pay 3 mana to draw 8 random cards, even though that would be really, really strong. You want to sort of get a tempo advantage on your opponents by wiping the board and then maybe develop a threat, or maybe doing something else with that, or maybe drawing some cards. Well, I mean, I guess Blood for the Blood God does draw cards, but yeah, the sequence costs 6 mana. You don't really want to play cards that piggyback back off of other good cards. They're not good on their own, so uh, Blood of the Blood God has eventually been cut. It's very disappointing. I really enjoy this card. Next up, we have Nether Spirit. This is a 3 mana 2/2 that reanimates itself from your graveyard if it's the only creature. Reanimates itself at the beginning of your upkeep if it's the only creature in your graveyard. This card is awesome. I love the idea of like an infinite value, pseudo infinite value 2/2. Notably, Nether Spirit has a leg up on other cards of its nature because it can also block. It's not like Bloodghast where doesn't have the can't block phase. So you could just use this to chump block a lot, keep your life total up. Very important for control deck. And having access permanently to a 2/2, similar to Dwarven Mine, having pseudo access to a small creature on demand is useful for cards like Village Rise to draw cards. Good for with Scorpion God to give you some sort of a reliable menacing. You can sacrifice Nether Spirit to Phyrexian Tower to make black. So lots of good things. And the cost theoretically is very low, especially if you're able to play cards like Entomb to throw into your graveyard, which unfortunately is not that good because Entomb is discard disadvantage, but we're not going to talk about that. Yeah, Nether Spirit is sweet. Cards, like, it brings me an immense amount of joy when I'm constantly recurring this out of the yard and just finding new ways to harvest it every single turn. But yeah, it's just not reliable. Unfortunately, I'm pretty tutor averse with my decks. I don't enjoy tutoring, especially because it scares the shit out of my opponents. And I just don't have the cards that are good enough to tutor with for me to be happy. And I'm not running cards like Entomb for Nether Spirit, even though that would be cool. So I build my deck around Nether Spirit by cutting most of the creatures. Maybe I include a couple of cards that would only be good if Nether Spirit is active, and just don't draw them. It's similar with the Sunken Citadel situation, similar with the Desecrate Reality situation, where you build your deck around a card and you just don't see the card in the vast majority of games that you play. So either the card has to be immensely good when you do draw it, which Nether Spirit is not. It is just a value 2/2 that comes back repeatedly. Very sweet card. I wish I could make more use of this, but alas, it has been cut. Maybe one day I'll come up with a good build for it. Just hasn't worked. Another card here that I've had a lot of fantasies about is Profane Transfusion. This is a 9 mana sorcery which allows 2 players to exchange their life totals, and you create an XX token equal to the difference. Profane Transfusion is really cool in a high level theoretical sense because we are playing a non-blue black deck where the primary way that we accumulate resources is to pay life, to draw cards. We're a control deck. People want to kill us. They're going to send their small creatures at us early in the game when they can get the damage in. And being able to manipulate your life total and then exchange it with somebody else maybe fling the token at them, lots of cool things maybe. The fantasy that is all there, right, for Profane Transfusion, and especially the sales pitch of a control deck that wants to drag out the game. Surely, this is the deck for a card like this. And yeah, as much as I want it to be true, it just isn't. First of all, in order for Provincial Fusion to do anything, you do need to hover at like a dangerously low life total for a pretty long time. And if your deck already plays other sorts of life gain, it actually cuts into the effectiveness of Profane Transfusion. Profane Transfusion really wants you to be the only card in your deck that is recovering life. Because if you've gained like 30 life, then the card doesn't do anything, right? So that's kind of unfortunate. A lot of games where you're hovering at a reasonable life total, like let's say 25, 35, you just die, right? Because that's what commander games look like. People just kill you from 40 because magic. So for all of those reasons, I just cannot justify playing Profane Transfusion. It's also a card where if you don't tutor for it, but you build your whole deck around it, very difficult to deal with, very difficult to reconcile. You will have the game where you've made it, you've stabilized the board at 10 life, and you're just ready to draw your Profane Transfusion. It doesn't come into your hand, and life just sucks, right? So very unfortunate, even though the card is very, very cool. Okay, so we've talked about some cards that are dream crushed, you could say. Um, and let's now move on to some just other miscellaneous cards. Here are a selection of threatens. We have, by the way, threatens are spells that temporarily gain control of something, but you give them back at the end of the turn. So here we have Take for a Ride. This is a 3-mana sorcery, which has flash if you committed a crime this turn, and just a very vanilla threaten, which can sometimes be cast in instant speed. Instant speed with threatens is very, very important. The number one use case I've found for threatens, or not a number one maybe, but a very good base case is to when somebody attacks me with a big board, taking one of their big attackers and then blocking with it. It's a very nice way to make sure that your threatens always have a baseline use case. But in general, threatens I've really enjoyed playing around with because they are sort of Rakdos's answer to like big dumb green bullshit creatures, especially ones that generate value or have like on death effects, even better. Being able to steal something huge, punch the green player back with it, and then sacrifice it, it's very satisfying. I've definitely really enjoyed these cards. But I think these types of effects are kind of nauseating to play at a high quantity, so I've gone with just one. Right, I'm playing Active Aggression, which I think is the best threaten out of all the threatens that are legal for this type of deck. And Active Aggression is 3 Phyrexian red instant. It steals a creature, so you can pay 3 mana and 4 life for it. It steals a creature, right, on top of gain haste and all that good stuff, right? Instant speed, which is very important. So Take for a Ride here kind of does an impression of Active Aggression, but having to commit a crime first is significantly more difficult than I thought. Even though Scorpion God's Sting ability commits a crime, you never really want to just sting something randomly in order to try to take a ride. It doesn't feel good, right? That sequence turns Take for a Ride from 3 mana to 6 mana, which is fine. That's still good, but it's not as good as Active Aggression, which is 3 mana unconditionally. Burning a removal spell that you didn't want to cast, just to turn on Take for a Ride doesn't feel good either, because removal spells are best, especially the instant ones, are best when you use them at the best time, right? You use them maybe before you untap, maybe before somebody is about to put an aura on their big value thing, you blow them out, stuff like that, or when someone's ready to harvest some triggers, right? That's when you use it at the last possible moment. And being forced to use removal spells not at the last possible moment to commit a crime for Take for a Ride has just been incredibly, incredibly medium. So fortunately, Take for a Ride we will not be taking a ride. Here we have Claim the Firstborn. It's a 1 mana threaten, so very efficient, but it only steals creatures that cost 3 or less, which can be pretty good. I have a friend who plays Clavelenio, which is a very prime candidate for a card like this because you can steal the commander, go to combat, attack with him, he becomes a vampire, sacrifice, get a 4/3. So there's some cool stuff going on with Claim the Firstborn. Unfortunately, commander players are degenerates. They love playing 4 or 5 plus mana permanent. So Claim the Forsworn does miss a lot. It's very meta dependent. I've decided to cut it for now just to reduce the number of threats that I play because it is kind of repetitive. It is kind of unpleasant to have somebody who just repeatedly steals your creatures and sacrifices them. So I've ended up cutting the first one, even though I think this card could be pretty good in your metagame. Next up, we have Comeback Rom. This is not a threaten explicitly, but it basically is a threaten. It's 3 mana sorcery. You destroy a creature, you reanimate it on your side of the battlefield, and it goes away at the next end step. Comeback Wrong is probably a pretty good threaten overall because the creature doesn't go back to the controller. You quote unquote take it for a turn, basically. Instead of giving it haste, though, right? Because all these red threatens, they untap the permanent, they give it haste, so you can like crack back at somebody if you steal something big. In the case of Come Back Wrong, you don't get to attack because the creature does not come back with haste. That's a big knock against it. However, the creature dying and then coming back on the battlefield does trigger into the battlefield abilities and maybe die triggers. So there are cool applications for that. I've just found that in a lot of games where there's a juicy target on the board for Come Back Wrong, there's a good chance that that creature probably gets sacrificed in response anyway, so your Comeback Wrong doesn't do anything. This is a big downside with threaten effects, is that a lot of the cards that you would want to steal just gets blanked by sacrifice effects, which feels really bad. I mean, at least in the case of like a card like Lightning Bolt, if you were to Lightning Bolt a Viscera here, which would be an example of a very threatening creature, or maybe you would Lightning Bolt a Blood Artist, if they just sacrifice in response, you don't feel so bad because you've only invested 1 mana. But a card like Comeback Rom, using it on a Viscera just feels horrible, right? They just sacrifice the Viscera in response, and you've paid 3 mana. It's really bad. And I've just not had games where Comeback Wrong steals something that is impactful for me to be happy with, so I ended up cutting it, but maybe that's an assumption that I should double check, right? And finally here we have Word of Seizing. This is a 5 mana threaten. It steals anything, not just creatures, very important, and it also has Split Second. Very, very cool upside, potentially game-breaking effect. Getting to steal something pretty much unconditionally can be very powerful. The dream I had with putting Word of Seizing in my deck is I wanted some degenerate blue player to put their Omniscience into play, then I'm going to Word of Seizing it, and then I'm going to go off in response, right? Because my deck plays tons of instants. And yeah, so not only did that never happen to me, the one game that I played Word of Seizing was against somebody who had assembled Sephirus and Phyrexian Altar with Revelar Karma Guide in their graveyard as their infinite combo outlet. And if you understand the way that split second work with mana abilities, mana abilities can be activated in response to split second. So if I was to use Word of Season to disrupt their combo, they just sacrifice the creatures in response and just execute the combo anyways. It was very, very miserable after that game. I said no, never Word of Season again, and yeah, I've never looked back. All right, next up we have Vona's Hunger. This is a 3 mana instant that is an edict. It's basically a flashback marauder, but if you have Ascend, which means 10 or more permanents, they, instead of sacrificing 1 creature, you sacrifice half their creatures, round it up instead. I've definitely had games where Vona's Hunger did a lot of stuff, but the unfortunate reality is that not controlling what you sacrifice is a big downside. That's pretty much it. The average quality of cards is so high that you really want to either pick what goes away or just get rid of everything. And leaving your opponents with their best half board is just not good enough. And I kind of don't understand why this card commands like a pretty high price for how good I think it is, which is not very good. And also missing when you don't have 10 permanents, right? Because games go out of control very early on as well. And frequently you cast Vona's Hunger without Ascend, which is pretty bad. So I've not enjoyed the card and I've managed to cut it. Here we have Consume the Meek and Nightmare on Making. These are two sort of medium-ish board wipes. Consume the Meek is a 5 mana instant that destroys all creatures with mana cost 0 or less. It's actually pretty good. I do enjoy a good Consume the Meek. But it helps me with the types of decks that I don't really struggle with, which are just sort of low to the ground board vomit token decks. I feel like I'm pretty good against them already, and I really want to dedicate more deck slots to deal with the value overwhelming green players. They're just ramping out of control and just dropping crazy bombs or whatever. So Consuming Meek doesn't help me with that, so that's pretty much why I cut it. But if you are in a metagame where people are playing tons of creatures, maybe they play hate bears, maybe they play tons of weenies, tokens, or whatever, Consuming Meek is excellent. Instant speed, one-sided is the perfect recipe for a board wipe that you want, because Scorpion God is a 5 mana creature, so it does not get affected by this. But yeah, I want to optimize for the green villains. Here, a Nightmare on Making is a 5 mana sorcery that lets you exile all creatures that have either more power or less power than the number of cards in your hand. Very spicy. You can sculpt your hand to, like, depending on the situation, the game state, if you want to go after big creatures, if you want to go after small creatures, you can engineer your hand and the board in such a way where it gets rid of all the things that you want. It's a very cool card. If you're looking for like board wipe number 5 in any black deck, I think this could be something that you could go after, being exile instead of destroy, very relevant. It's just that for me, I don't want to overload too much on the board wipe, so I'm already playing a Oblivion Stone, Blasphemous Act, Blasphemous Edict, Toxic Deluge. That's a good number for me. I kind of had too many games where I just board wipe into board wipe every other turn. The games feel very boring. The games are not enjoyable for my opponents when that happens. So I try to keep it down low on the board wipe count. So this one doesn't make it. I think if I was in the market for a couple more, maybe this could make it in. It's a very cool card. Next up, we have Dark Petition. There's not much to say here. This is a 5 mana tutor, but it refunds you with triple black if you cast it with Spell Mastery, which is 2 or more instances to your graveyard. I just find tutoring really boring, which is not a really good argument, so you should probably play this card. But I've just found it so that when I have Dark Petition in my hand, I use it to find like a card draw spell, to find land drops. That's what happens when I draw Dark Petition. And if you disagree, if you think maybe you could do better things with Dark Petition, then more power to you, and you should play Dark Petition. Next up, we have Vandal Blast. This is a single red sorcery, destroy target artifact you don't control, and you can overload it for 5. Vandal Blast is probably good. I just not found overloading it to be too satisfactory. This is kind of crazy because artifact decks are getting pushed out more and more nowadays, especially with the recent sets. We have tons of vehicles. We have the Wizards is pushing more and more 3-drop mana rocks, so probably Vandal Blast is worth playing. But yeah, I don't know. It's sorcery speed. Whenever I overload Vandal Blast, it doesn't feel that good. If I'm playing against somebody who's playing an artifact deck that's susceptible enough to Vandal Blast to the point where they like lose if it resolves, not really interesting. That's not a type of deck that I'm interested in like being better against. And yeah, I like to play Mock Salvage, which is a 3 mana instant. It kills just 1 artifact, but it's free if there's an opponent has an island and you have a mountain, which is like most games. So I like that one a lot. I like Kolagon's Command, very flexible, can shock a creature as well, can regrow a creature, which I've definitely enjoy. So I prefer those over something like Vandal Blast. But yeah, if your meta is full of mana rocks and you want to kick them down a notch, you should probably play Vandal Blast. Next up, I have Arcane Lighthouse. This is a land that taps for colorless, and you can pay one and tap it to remove Hexproof and Shroud from your opponent's stuff on turn. So a type of card like this theoretically makes a lot of sense in a deck that's playing tons of removal spells like Scorpion God, but the reality is you have access to tons of edicts and board webs anyways to deal with things that can't be targeted with single target removal, and the current suite of protection spell that people play nowadays, like people play cards like Slip Out the Back, people play cards that phase out, right? And there's stuff that gives the green protection spells like Tamiyo Safekeeping not only give hexproof but also indestructible. So Arcane Lighthouse just doesn't do a lot, right? It doesn't remove indestructible, so there's some issue there, but the more pertinent issue is just that I don't need this card. I put this into my deck for a very long time. I've activated maybe once. There was one game where Arcane Lighthouse was good to activate. I had an opponent playing mono red, Karn the Betrayer. It's a 5/1. He put a Swiftfoot Boots on it. It's one of those like red commanders that circles around the table, slapping everybody because it has to attack every turn. And yeah, they had Swiftfoot Boots on it. I was searching through my deck with Expedition Map, and I had the option of finding Arcane Lighthouse, removing that hexproof with from their Swiftfoot Boots, and then stinging it with Scorpion God because Karn's a 5/1. And I felt so bad. Like I didn't want to do that to them, so I just didn't do it. It's kind of crazy. And that's like the moment that I realized, like, wait a minute, I don't ever activate Arcane Lighthouse. This is the perfect game. I'm sitting in a game where Arcane Lighthouse is the card I should play. Like, just absolutely does the job that it's meant to do, and I don't even want to play it. It's kind of crazy. So yeah, I've managed to cut Arcane Lighthouse from my deck, and I've not looked back. I have not really ever thought about needing this effect. Okay, so next up we have Grim Lavamancer. Grim Lavamancer is a single red for a 1/1 that you can pay red and tap, exile 2 cards from your graveyard to shock any target. Grim Lavamancer is crazy. This is one of those cards that I did not expect to be as bad as it is, because you would imagine that a repeatable shock in Commander is very valuable, especially in a deck that can piggyback off that shock with a lightning bolt, especially in a deck that can then stain creatures to make that quote unquote 3 damage with Scorpion God. And feeding the 2 cards for Grim Lavamancer is not a cost when the deck has tons and tons of spells that easily go to the graveyard, and we're not interested in doing much graveyard recursion. And in a pinch, of course, this is something that's very funny with all creatures. Any creature that you put in a Scorpion God deck can theoretically, you can sting it yourself with Scorpion God to draw a card in a pinch, but that never happens, so don't think about that. Grim Lavamancer is awful. Actually, this card is completely terrible. What happens with this card most of the time is I draw it in the late game when somebody has a medium-sized creature that needs to die, and I draw Grim Lavamancer, and it doesn't have haste. Can't kill it. It's very sad, and I lose. It's very this happened to me many times. The fact that Grim Lavamancer needs to untap just makes it such a brutal later gameplay. You really need to already be in a comfortable position in order for Grim Lavamancer to be a card that I'm happy to deploy. And that's just not the case, right? In any game that I play, in the late game, the games are generally like pretty close. The turn that I'm taking off with Grim Lavamancer, absolutely big cost. And even worse, in games where Grim Lavamancer would be amazing, because maybe somebody's playing Timna the Weaver, which I believe is a 2,000 creature, right? Having Grim Lavamancer in play would just make them not have their Timna out, which is good. We're beating the evil Timna players, and they just target it with a Source of Plowshares. And sure, you can argue that we've gotten rid of one of the removal spells, but I'm not happy with that. I have 3 opponents in a game of Commander, so I'm dealing with 3 times the cardboard. I'm not happy when opponents trade their cardboard for me with me one for one on their terms. It's not an experience that I'm super happy to do. I'm happy to do that myself, selectively trading with my opponents. Right when I choose to remove the things that I want to remove, there are goals in mind. I get to choose whether I do that. I can also not do that. It's very frequent situation would be somebody's at the table. They're very scary. I need help to beat them, so I kill their stuff. But maybe somebody else also has egregious permanents. I leave them in play because I need them to be a force to be reckoned with, right? So playing Grim Lavamancer, not a good place to be. It gets exiled. It just dies to removal that I don't like. It never does the thing that I wanted to do when it does, and then in games where I need a real removal spell that does kill something now, it doesn't do. So I end up cutting the card. Okay, next up we have Rousing Refrain. This is a 5 mana sorcery that makes red for every card in target opponent's hand, and it goes back to on suspend with 3 counters, or it has suspend 3. So this is a there's very many reasons to enjoy a card like Rousing Refrain in a Scorpion God Obosh deck, because Rousing Refrain can be suspended for 2 mana. So this is a rare turn 2 play in a Obosh deck, which is something that's probably pretty valuable. And the fact that the deck that I'm playing here is a very grindy deck that wants the game to go long. If I draw Rousing Refrain on turn 2, it's very likely it's getting 2 activations, at the bare minimum, 2 activations, maybe 3, maybe 4, depending on the length of the game. So in that regard, Rousing Refrain is amazing. It's quite a good early game play, but suffers from being a terrible card to draw later. When you draw Rousing Refrain anywhere after like turn 5, it's very rare that you will make more than 5 mana from this. Like, of course, that's going to happen, but paying 5 mana in a sorcery to make 7 red mana, it's just kind of whatever. And the suspend 3 on it, it's an eternity. 3 turns is an eternity away, and so yeah, if you want stuff to do things now, it's Rousing Refrain is not it, right? And it only making red mana does also come up. I've definitely done a lot of resolving Rousing Refrain on turn 5. It makes me 7 red mana, and then I just spend all that red mana stinking creatures, which is fine. That's like totally valid play. But it doesn't make black mana, so I still have tap mana lands. It's not great. So Rousing Refrain, unfortunately, even though I love this card, has been cut over time. Next up is Necroplasm. This is a 1 black 1/1 that gets a +1/+1 counter on your upkeep, and on your end step, it destroys every creature on the battlefield that's mana cost equal to its the number of counters it has. So the way that this card works is that the turn that you play this, it has no counters, so you move to your end step, it destroys all creatures that have no mana value, and on the next turn, it gets a counter, destroys all creatures with 1 mana value on your end step. So the destroy always happens on your end step, but it gets a counter on your upkeep. So if you don't do anything to manipulate this card, on the third upkeep that this resolves, it will destroy all 3 drops, and it itself is a 3 drop. So that's what's going to happen, but it does have Dredge 2, so when Necroplasm eventually does kill itself, you have the option of dredging it back to your hand. So what we can do with Necroplasm in the Scorpion God is we can actually manipulate the number of counters on it with the Scorpion God by applying -1/-1 counters on it with the Scorpion God Stain ability. And what this lets us do basically is it allows us to have Necroplasm stay at a constant number. Usually this is 0 because tokens. So with Necroplasm, you move to your end step, you destroy all tokens. Next turn, it gets a counter, and then you sting it once with Scorpion God to reset the counters back to 0, then destroying all tokens again. So you can, this kind of like a soft token lock. It's very cool. Unfortunately, same thing with Consume the Meek. Don't really feel like I need more help against token decks. And yeah, that's actually just kind of it. It doesn't kill big creatures. Big creatures are problems. So unfortunately, so the cool things with Necroplasm, there are some like super sweet sequences that you can get into. Like let's say your token opponent doesn't want you to have Necroplasm, so they try to Source of Plowshares it before your end step. With Scorpion God in play, you can go Sting Necroplasm, which kills it. So 1 toughness creature, it dies, you draw a card from Scorpion God. Dredge 2, you put the Necroplasm back in your hand, and this is your second main because your opponents cannot wait until the beginning of the next end step, and you can just re-resolve it, right? Assuming that you have the mana. It's pretty cool. Lots of cool sequences that you can execute with Necroplasm, but fortunately it has made the cut over time. All right, next up we have a Volcanic Offering. This is a 5 mana instant. This card is a mouthful. Basically what it does is that I can choose a creature. I can deal 7 damage to a creature that I don't... sorry, let's start again. I can deal 7 damage to an opponent's creature, and I can destroy an opponent's land. So that's what I get to choose. I get to sap a creature for 7, destroy a land. As long as it's not mine. So all of my stuff is saved from Volcanic Offering. I can only target opponent stuff. And then an opponent also chooses a creature and chooses a land to be blown up. The targets that both players choose can be the same. So the card that I choose, the creature that I target with Volcanic Offering, can also be targeted by the opponent who makes the choice. And this aspect makes the card really annoying to explain. Because if I just say, well, we blow up 2 things, 2 creatures and 2 lands, right? If we can just say that, that would be great. But I don't want to lie to my opponents about my cards, so I tell them, hey, I'm going to pick a creature. You also can pick a creature, but you can pick the same creature. I'm going to pick a land. You also pick a land, but you can pick the same land. Oh, and by the way, you can't pick my land. It's just absolutely frustrating to explain to people what Volcanic Offering does. And the reason why this is really important is because Volcanic Offering, if the opponents never pick the same thing that I'm picking, the card is obscenely powerful, right? This is a 4-for-1 at instant speed. It destroys 2 lands, it destroys 2 creatures. Like, the card is absolutely insane. But to get this kind of effect, it's really at best exploiting either newer players who don't have poor threat assessment, players who are maybe emotional because somebody else is doing terrible things to them. I don't know, right? But it's very easy with Volcanic Offering to select a player who you know is going to make a bad choice for themselves. And I'm not in the business of playing cards to exploit people like that, so this is a card that I try pretty hard to stay away from. And not only does this card exploit poor play, it also is very bad against savvier opponents that will realize that you getting full value out of this card is not a good idea, and they will just choose the same thing that you do. Right? Even though there's going to be stuff on the board that they know they would also like to get rid of, they will not allow that to happen because maybe it's a bigger problem for me, right? And so, yeah, Volcanic Offering just ends up getting cut. And not to mention, the final nail in the coffin for this card is that you can blow up two lands from the same player, and like, ugh, that we should encourage more land destruction, but the way that Volcanic Offering achieves that, I think, can ends up being really, really spiteful, right? You can imagine easily in a situation where somebody won a game spectacularly in the previous game, and then the next game I just go after one of their lands, and then I get a second player who's maybe kind of salty to go after a second land to make sure that they don't win. That's not a good place to be. I also don't like the idea of threatening people, because you can say, okay, I'm gonna blow up this land, but I could blow up your good land, but instead I'm gonna blow up this less good land, but only if you do the thing that I say, right? So all of these things that you could do with this card that I don't find very pleasant, and I just don't want to deal with any of that. On top of like being a crazy mouthful to explain, even though the card is really not that complicated. So unfortunately, Volcanic Offering gets the cut. Next up, we have Shiny Impetus. This is a 2 and a red for an enchantment. Gives the enchanted creature +2/+2, goaded. When it attacks, I make a treasure. This card is actually really sweet. I have a friend who absolutely despises this card, thinks it's unplayable, but I enjoy it. The reason why I would consider a card like this is that in a control deck that doesn't really play to the board really well in the early stages of the game, being able to redirect attackers away is very valuable. The treasure generation is nice. Pressures your opponents. So there's good stuff going on. And of course, Shiny Impetus, you can enchant it on your own creature to make it bigger. So lots of things to like about Shiny Impetus. But all of the early game prowess that this card has is sort of negated in the late game. Um, you know, anytime your opponents can sacrifice creatures or the creatures have tab ability, they're not good targets for Shiny Impetus. The creature that you enchant doesn't die. If it has some annoying persistent ability, you're not very happy about that. If it has attack triggers, you're not happy about that. And the creatures that you enchant is also not guaranteed to survive and do an attack, right? Because, we Shiny Impetus a creature, board wipe, the following player board wipes, Shiny Impetus doesn't do anything. So all these make Shiny Impetus like a pretty medium to bad card in the late game, and because of that, I ended up cutting it, even though this card is super cool and I like it. Alright, we're nearing the end here. I've skipped a lot of cards as well that I've just decided not to talk about. And for our penultimate set, we have Foretell cards. So we have Demon Bolts, Poison the Cup, Crush the Weak, Turquoise Shadow. It's not very important what these cards does. These are just kind of removal spells in Rakdos colors that are illegal for an Obosh deck. And all of them are very overcosted. For example, Demon Bolt deals 4 damage to a creature, but it costs 3 mana. The original motivation to include these is the fact that they are Foretell cards, and Foretell cards you can pay 2 mana to sort of suspend them, kind of, in the early turns, giving you an early turn play, which I thought would be interesting. And it's true. If you draw any of these in your opening hand, Foretelling it on turn 2 feels pretty good. But, as with many cards that we've talked about today, if you draw them in the late stages of the game, and having kind of basically to pay full retail for them doesn't feel good. It's unfortunately too underpowered, but I'm very happy to have explored these. I think it's very cool and important for anybody to really go out of their way to experiment, especially with cards that are good on the curve. I think it was a very good experiment. I'm very happy to have played these. And all right, here our final set of cards here. Let's start with Chandra's Ignition. This is a 5 mana sorcery. Target creature I control deals damage to each other creature and each opponent. Chandra's Ignition is kind of a poster child for any red deck that cares about damage. I think this card is incredibly overplayed. Unless you have means to sort of soft guarantee that Chandra's Ignition will either win you the game or will resolve. So what I mean by that is, if the creature that you're targeting with Chandra's Ignition is very likely to have hexproof, then I'm much more excited about Chandra's Ignition. But otherwise, I just see this card gets played in any red deck that has like somewhat of a big commander, or just has access to any like kind of big creatures, and I just don't love that. This is very high risk, high risk, high reward, which is I guess what the people love in Commander. But I hate this. I play decks that will rarely get caught off guard with Chandra's Ignition, and if I'm the one that just makes your Stranger's Ignition terrible, I don't want to be the person that also plays Stranger's Ignition. Just like kind of doesn't make any sense, right? And yeah, this has anti synergy with Obosh. Obosh, well, it's synergistic with Obosh because Obosh will double the damage from Stranger's Ignition. But if you target Scorpion God with Stranger's Ignition, Obosh will die, right? It's not a good place to be, and yeah, just not about that in my life. I don't want my 5 mana spell to get countered by Swords to Plowshares. So that's as simple as that. And closing things off, we have Field of the Dead. And alongside Field of the Dead, we have a snow-covered mountain, a snow-covered swamp, because we would be playing these to increase our unique land name counts. Field of the Dead is very powerful. It basically gives you landfall, make a 2/2, as long as you have 7 or more unique lands, which is like free, right? This is Commander, Singleton, etc., etc. Right? It's effect's absolutely free. Yeah, Field of the Dead is absolutely disgusting. Similar to Double Vision, I talked about very early on. Winning a game with Field of the Dead feels incredibly unsatisfying, and it doesn't even need to take over the game in a way, even though it can do that. Games where people are aggroing you out, and you drop the Scorpion God, and then you play a Field of the Dead and crack a fetch land and make 3/2/2 zombies, is just the vibes are just off when Field of the Dead hits play, because the creatures are free. It doesn't basically cost me nothing to put into play, and you know when I play Field of the Dead, I get the raised eyebrows from my opponents, right? Oh, this is the kind of game we're playing, kind of thing, right? So yeah, Field of the Dead is just kind of a design mistake, broken card, and this card is here because I want to remind you that even though this whole time I've talked about cards that I think are good, good cards are not as important as cards that make you feel good. And Field of the Dead is a card that feels terrible to play. So over time, I have removed Field of the Dead from my decks, even though the card is very powerful. And that's it. Thank you for watching/listening, and I will maybe see you next time.